And we're back yet again. It's 40 minutes above the hour here in San Diego at the ASU GSV Innovation Conference. I'm C. Green. I'm talking with Bridget Burns, who is the director of the University Innovation Alliance. Bridget, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So just a little bit of housekeeping again to our audience, because people are coming in and out. We suspect that there are not a lot of folks who have 4 hours to watch all these interviews, but may be coming back. You can provide comments and ask questions. We can try to do those by text or bring you in interactively. We'll be vetting those questions. Welcome your comments and suggestions as we go forward. So, Bridget, I'm going to give you the opportunity for shameless self-promotion as we begin. Tell us about the University Innovation Alliance.
So the University Innovation Alliance is a national consortium of universities united around the urgency to improve outcomes for low-income students and produce more college degrees, specifically research-level degrees from universities around the country. So essentially, we have this massive achievement gap. People are
And historic. I mean, this has been with us for a long time.
We've been making basically no progress. And the structure of higher education nationally is set up so that universities will go it alone. And we think that's a waste of time, energy, and money. And so we're finding ways to partner up to share and accelerate innovation that we know already works to serve low-income, first-generation, and students of color. And we're testing it across each other's campuses. And we're also setting very big public goals. We're sharing our data. And we are really trying to test out a new method for collaboration that is less of a bummer and actually makes our jobs
less
better.
Of a bummer?
Less of a bummer. Most
is that a technical term?
It's a scientific term.
Yeah.
And we want to actually make it a positive experience so that campuses can move forward quickly. And while doing that, we also want to develop a playbook of interventions that work for institutions and a method for scale, both of which are really missing from our field, which is why we have this massive gap.
All right, so let's disaggregate some of that in a little bit. I spoke yesterday, had a very engaging conversation with Michael Crow, president of ASU. You're based at ASU, but you run are you not?
No, I actually live in Portland, Oregon, but the UIA, the funds we raise, we land at ASU, and then we have an MOU with all the other campuses, okay. But he's also the chair of the UIA.
So ASU has done some dramatic things. The risk of redundancy for our audience, I mentioned this yesterday, under President Crow's leadership, the university has not only grown enrollments dramatically, it's improved retention and completion rates, and especially for low income and students of color. And research funding has gained dramatically, all while the Arizona legislature has whacked the budget for post-secondary education in the state. Impressive, individually, let alone collectively, for those things. Georgia State, one of the Innovation Alliance members, as I recall, has also had some impressive gains in terms of effectively eliminating the retention and completion gaps between students, white students and students of color and income. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. Can you point to some other activities at some of the other Alliance members? Those are the two that I'm most aware of.
Yeah. So each of our campuses has developed an intervention or an innovation that we're starting to see significant gains from. The nice thing is none of them are doing the same thing. So I could talk to you about the University Leaders Network at UT Austin, where they're essentially using financial aid as pay to actually design the student experience so the most vulnerable students are interrupted with kinds of interventions and support that would make them successful. And then they are paid the money that would be institution need-based aid anyway, but instead it's coming monthly into their student account. And it's causing massive changes on their campuses for students who historically would graduate at about a 30% clip and are above 90% in this group. So that would be one piece. And there was a New York Times article about that went pretty far. I could talk to you about Michigan State and how they've made a giant campus that serves 50,000 students feel intimate and feel personal for all their students by creating neighborhoods where instead of just normal residence halls, they actually take, advising different student supports and embed them in the advising or in the residence halls and make them feel like a unique neighborhood with its own personality. I could talk to you about how University of Central Florida has this amazing program called Direct Connect, where if you go to Valencia Community College, you're automatically in at UCF. After 2 years, you are on track. You are now in UCF. You're now a UCF student. You're on track to graduate on time. The seamlessness that they have created has now been scaled elsewhere, and they are really showing tremendous numbers of transfer students being extremely successful.
Okay. I know you love all your children. We don't have time to go through all 11 of them, or 13 of them, but I want to come back to your bummer comment. agnostic, given my age and a lot of stuff that I've seen in higher education for the decades that I've worked in higher ed. In the sense of, often announcements about consortia and alliances are pretty much that. They're kind of Potemkin villages, if you will. We've all banded together. Somebody's given us some money. We're all going to try to do good, and we're going to try to do better. And that may be the high point of the whole initiative. What will sustain the efforts of the alliance? And you talked about transferability, where each of the member institutions are doing something different towards a common goal as it relates to retention, completion, and the experience of individual students. How will those things scale? How will those things be transferable? Because in many cases, it would seem that some of those are just unique to context and culture and campus leadership.
Well, it turns out that the real challenge we're facing, while we have an innovation deficit and we definitely need to be creating new solutions, it seems to be that we really need to innovate how we diffuse ideas and how we spread about what works. So the traditional model that we share ideas is conferences and white papers and people moving between universities. Very slow, very stagnant.
Very traditional academic model.
Doesn't really work. Or you're in a collaborative that is, systems which are a forced collaborative, or ones where you just have meetings and that's great, but that's not a lot of action, or you have to physically travel very far, or you don't actually have anything in common, you don't know those people. So we started with, instead of trying to create a collaborative, we started with a problem that we were all unified around. It was led by the CEOs of these universities, and I think that's unique. The other piece is we didn't reinvent the wheel. We went to all places that we've seen great ideas. So Carnegie's Improvement Science. We looked at the eSchool at Stanford, at design thinking as one of the initial pieces that we focused on. The CIC, which has been around for 50 years and is incredibly successful.
You're talking about the Consortium of Institutional Cooperation?
Yeah.
Which is largely the Bintan schools in the University of Chicago.
So there's all kinds of collaboratives out there. I started first by listening, and we designed the entire experience around the needs of the campuses instead of just, okay, well, I guess we have a conference once a year or whatever. So what we found is we have different levels of collaboration. So the presidents and the CEOs, the chancellors get together on a regular basis and they talk, and it's just me and the 11 of them. And then the liaisons, who are the senior level administrators and leaders on these campuses who are really the change agents who are responsible for delivering, they all meet together on a regular basis. Then we also brought them fellows who are really smart, dynamic, early to mid-career thinker and doers who are adding additional capacity to the campus. So You're
bringing in new people. You're essentially elevating existing people.
New people. So a lot
so
of
you're providing the
PhDs,
resources in one sense.
Yes. So this is what the money raised is for: is providing them actual capacity to do this work. A lot of the time, what happens is we have these jobs, and we assume that your plate can just expand, and then on top of it, by the way, can you also collaborate? It doesn't make any sense. It's a real job. It needs actual resources and people to be able to support it. So that's part of it. How do we know it maintains? I think we have some promising early success. We're sharing data down to a student unit record level.
Okay.
We have already seen that since we formed, we're now on track to graduate an additional almost 100,000 students over the next decade.
100,000 students over
across the Alliance.
Which is 11, 13 institutions?
We have 11 institutions. We're about 400,000 students right now. We are slightly higher percentage of low income and minority students on our campuses. And our commitment is, originally, we wanted to graduate an additional 68,000. At the White House Summit, we announced that, and then at least half of those were going to be low income. Now, it's been a year, and we found that we're actually on track to beat that goal.
So, again, the trajectory, just to render that down, each institution effectively, plus or minus, an additional 10,000 degrees above and beyond what might have been the trajectory before the Alliance.
Beyond existing capacity and all stretch goals that existed at the institutions.
Okay.
So we're holding each other accountable. We actually are building real relationships. Now it's not me in the middle being like, hey, share ideas. People are calling each other constantly. They're hanging out. They're working on new ideas. They're launching new projects. One that we just launched is led by Georgia State, which is a 10,000 student random control trial around first generation students. So there's a whole lot of talk about them.
So there's a lot of commitment to data, a lot of commitment to evidence in this process. Easy to measure the individual activities in one sense, in terms of what goes on at any one of the individual campuses. What are the metrics for success in terms of the Alliance itself? That's a little harder because so much of this is about the activities that the the activities, the leadership, the commitments at individual institutions. Yeah, you may get to the 10,000, you may get to 100,000 students across the group. That may be plus or minus for the individual campuses. 5 years from now, when President Crow and his counterparts gather to say, okay, we're 5 years in from 2021, what will be the metrics for success, or sort of the metrics of measurement about the alliance itself, the different above and beyond, the gestalt, if you will?
So I think it's really the organic scaling that we're starting to see. It's where it wasn't even a project that we were talking about, and all of a sudden I find out a campus saw an idea during one of our meetings, ran with it, implemented it, adapted it, evolved it, and actually has results. So I have a bunch of stories of how that's happened, and I think that for me is what's meaningful. But on the broad scale, we have the national model for student success in the Alliance, Georgia State. The way I measure this is, it took them 7 years to do that, to transform completely, to double their graduation rate, to eliminate race and income as a predictor of outcome. So I have 7 years for each of these campuses to transform into a national model for student success. That is how I'm going to measure our success. And there's data, and there's going to be a playbook, but also how do we bring other people along? So already this month.
So does that mean training institutes? In other words, that the Alliance will sponsor training either for young academics who want administrative careers, or others who are part of the institutional infrastructure who are not Alliance members, to say, look, we're doing a 2, 3, 4-day training institute based on the experience of our members to help you understand what we're doing for adaptation at your own institutions?
Possibly. So the way, we didn't even put an invitation out, and we already have almost 50 universities who've raised their hand and said, we want to be in. And I can't go to more than 11 places at once, right? Also, these relationships are starting to be real, and we think it's not that we're an exclusive club. This is a cause that you believe in, and that we want to prototype a method that you can do it. So already this month, a new collaborative formed, another 11 university consortium funded by one of our funders has formed because they're trying to now replicate what the Alliance is doing. So what we want to do is support other consortia forming up, using these ideas, adding it, take it and run with it. Don't cut and paste, do whatever works. But we just want to be of service to the broader higher ed community because ideas are not spreading. So what would that look like? A playbook. Many other national collaboratives, proven methods for scale, and seeing other campuses use them.
What about qualifying? I think about the experience at ASU, I think about Georgia State, some of the other institutions. These are institutions that have very strong, very prominent leaders in the office of the president. Not all institutions have that, or again, presidencies are in one sense pendulums or bungee cords in terms of one person in and replaced by somebody else. Every presidency is a reaction to the one that preceded. The king is dead, or the queen is dead. Long live the new king and the new queen. Sustainability beyond the person who makes the initial commitment.
Well, I've already had 2 transitions for presidencies within the Alliance since.
Presumably not at the same institution.
No.
Okay.
And so I do think you're flagging an important issue that, if I had the time, energy, and money, I would run a regression analysis of every campus in the country, how innovative they are against the tenure of their presidencies, and how long presidents stay, and how many they've gone through, because it really holds them back.
How innovative? What are the metrics that you would use to say innovation?
Well, so
and that's a very, for many, that's a very laden or a very ambiguous term.
Yeah, but I actually think you
okay,
know,
so
right?
No, I may, but
oh, I do. Well, so
what are the 5 or 6 characteristics of innovation that you would use for that regression?
Well, I think there are some things that are pretty easy to look at that are tests for, like we're using predictive analytics right now. Okay. So let's talk about your data. Let's see, what information do you have access to that you didn't used to? We could pick a few metrics that most campuses can't give us feedback on. How many of your students are currently on track to graduate, not just retaining, right? Like retention is not a useful metric. I think I look at how ideas spread within these campuses. So I spent a year as an ACE fellow, shadowing.
That's the American Council on Education Fellow Program.
It's like maybe President's School.
Right.
So I followed Michael Crow around for a year to really understand what is the distinct difference between an innovative president and others. I was on my first presidential hiring committee when I was 22. I was involved in the non-renewal of a president within 2 years. I've worked with, advised 27 university presidents at this time. So I feel like I have a sense of the field, but I want to know the difference between innovators and the rest. And so that was what I was doing with Mike. But then the other piece was I went to more than 50 campuses and I interviewed their CEOs and I asked 2 questions. 1, what are you doing that you think is innovative for student success? And 2, what is something someone else is doing around you? I never found a single leader who answered that second question with any level of specificity.
Okay.
Okay, so that points to the diffusion problem.
And in those, when you ask those of the leaders against your own filter, for those that proclaimed this is what we're doing is innovative, how many of those that said we're doing something innovative would you deem innovative? I don't ask for names and campuses.
I would say you have probably less than 30 universities in the country. There are almost 5,000 colleges and universities in the U.S. What I found is that they fell into 3 categories. 1, they would point to something and say, we're doing this, and I would look at it, and it would not be innovative. And in fact, I'd seen something 50 miles down the road that was done better, and they didn't know about it. 2, there were campuses who were doing something that they didn't know was innovative. It was just how they did things.
So
it was
we're
just
doing
the
it's part of our culture.
right?
Somebody said, suggested.
And just, again, when they don't know, that's about that diffusion problem. And then 3rd, I would say, again, it's a very small group. I'm lucky that I have a lot of these innovators, but they exist in every sector. They're fantastic community college leaders and HBCU leaders and regional publics, and some private schools are doing interesting things. But I'm just lowball. I'm guessing I'd say less than 30 that are actively engaging in experimentation and testing and refining and okay with failure and reiterate and constant iteration. So I think that was my assessment before forming the UIA. Like as we were piecing this together, and it became clear that our work would fall into 3 categories, which is innovation. What can we do together based on more people in the room, better ideas together. 2, scale. It was clear there was no method for scale. Like Six Sigma, Lean. These exist in other sectors. There's no method for scale in higher ed. And then we're whining about the fact that we have a massive achievement gap and we're not producing enough graduates. Well, I mean, those 2 are connected. And 3, diffusion. We have to innovate the way we share ideas. And that's through whether it's technology solutions. Conferences are designed for people to share headlines on stage. And headlines do not spread. I mean, we spend millions of dollars on conferences every year. And the transfer of ideas, like the transfer versus coverage debate, what we do is we take the sage on the stage model, we add a microphone and a bigger audience. Like we know that doesn't actually transfer ideas. Yeah. No. And so we think that we have to create a space where it's safe to test and try new things. So that's what we're trying to do.
Good thoughts. Bridget, thanks very much for joining us. Again, I've been talking with Bridget Burns, who's the director of the University Innovation Alliance, and we're at the ASU Innovation Summit, ASU GSV Innovation Summit. Thank you. We'll be right back. Next up, Rick Miller, who's president, actually the founding president of the Olean College of Engineering. He's going to tell us about the process of actually creating a new college, in a new engineering college.